Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 859 for the 23rd of March 2025. Richard Saunders coming to you from wet and rainy Sydney, Australia. Coming up on this week's show, wow, what an interview we have for you. Adrienne Hill interviews Johnathan Jarry. Now, we've had Johnathan Jarry on the show before. Now, Adrienne will chat with Johnathan, who is from the McGill Office of Science and Society, and that's in Canada, regarding his recent expose on Joseph Mercola. Now, that's a very famous name in the halls of quackery. Johnathan describes the controversial and jaw-dropping findings discovered after a whistleblower sent him videos depicting strange conversations between Mercola and a psychic medium. An eye-opening, or in this case an ear-opening, investigation and interview. Find out more at the top of the show, and don't forget then to have a look at the show notes. It's complete with video and more information. Following that, I take off all my clothes and put them back on again to read a piece called The Naked Skeptic. I wrote this piece way back in 2002, long since hadn't thought about it, and I stumbled across it doing other research online, and I thought, that looks familiar. The Naked Skeptic, all about how science is abused every day in our society. Then after that, we go to the TROVE Archives again, and not only to newspaper archives, we also reference James Randi in an episode of his show called James Randi Psychic Investigator. Adrienne Hill and McLeod, the loons from Canada, also helped me with this segment, and it's all about graphology. Graphology, this is where people claim to be able to glean characteristics of an individual based purely on their handwriting. How do you slope the T's where the dots are put? How big is the loop in your E? Do you use slanted writing when you're using this particular letter? And so on. And, no spoiler alert, I'm sure it's pseudoscience. It doesn't work. But many people to this very day think it's genuine. Now, a couple of exciting announcements coming up. First of all, for you lucky people in Melbourne, Psychic Penny is headed your way. I guess she's taking a ride in the slightly rusty bucket. She's heading for Melbourne. Of course, she's going to be joined by her friend Adrienne Hill, and Adrienne will be at the Skeptics Cafe. And this is a meeting held at the function room at the Stolberg Hotel, which is in Plenty Road Preston. And this is on the 31st of March, Monday 31st of March, with dinner at 6 and then the talk at 7:30. And Adrienne's talk will be Tourette Syndrome, Sounds, Movements and Myths. And of course, if you go there to meet Adrienne, you can probably coax her friend Psychic Penny to give you an autograph. I'm sure that's on the cards, the tarot cards. Also, I'm delighted to say that next month here in Sydney Skeptics in the Pub, we have a special guest via video link, none other than Karen Bickersma from Melbourne, who's going to be talking about how people, especially women, can be vulnerable online, and they can be preyed upon by sharks and con men and con women, con people. I guess we should have a collective term for these sort of people who take advantage of others, and that promises to be a very interesting talk. But that will be the first Thursday in April here in Sydney Skeptics in the Pub. So more about that soon. Now, before we start the show, well, the show's already started. Before we get into the segments, a quick mention. Over the last week, there have been many references and comments on social media to the supposed astounding findings under the pyramids in Egypt of giant structures going down kilometers, and people making a big song and dance about this, saying, there you are, you see, they knew more, the ancient Egyptians or the aliens look at this amazing technology, and there's fantastic images, graphics being made of these huge columns with spirals, and people are saying, well, look, obviously it was made for power generation. Oh boy, and I made a very bad mistake, my friends. I made the mistake of trying to argue with these people online. Didn't get very far, but it was worth it sort of in the end, because while I was looking at this subject, I did come across people who are willing to simply state the truth, or at least the truth as they see it, backed up with good information, or backed up with, dare I say, common sense. So I'll play to you a short clip I discovered by Annelise Baer, who's an archaeologist and relatively prominent on social media. And this is from one of her TikTok postings about this very subject.
Well, like Beetlejuice, I have been summoned because I have been tagged in a specific video so many times about structures underneath the pyramids. Are they real? What are my thoughts? This is simply an example of the latest conspiracy du jour about Egypt, and specifically the pyramids, having mystical powers, mystical purposes, mystical structures. And it's designed to spread misinformation, pseudoscience, and undermine actual experts and their knowledge. That unfortunate image is based off of a study that was originally done in 2022 about whether or not a specific type of radar could be applied for scanning megalithic monuments like the pyramids. Here's the paper right here. I will link it so you can look at it as well. Honestly, like 98% of this specific paper is fine. Like, the science checks out, there's a bunch of fun math. We have results of the different scans they did on different parts of the pyramids and the Giza Plateau showing that this type of radar could work and could be applied as a non-invasive method of investigating and scanning megalithic monuments and things made out of rock. The problem comes at the end of the paper, specifically in the discussion and the conclusion, where it goes fully off the rails and into the deep end. And in their conclusion, the team says that from the results that they received from their scans, that the pyramids may have been filled with water and then flushed through the various channels within the pyramids at some point or several points. And this situation in which the Great Pyramid would have been filled specifically through the King's Chamber and the Queen's Chamber? No, just the Queen's Chamber, would have created a type of closed circuit system which would have caused vibrations, which I guess generates power. So all of this is to say that when you see and hear things like this on the internet, it's important to use your brain and critical thinking skills to identify the hallmarks and red flags that go along with pseudoscience and conspiracy theories.
Well said, Annelise Baer. And I will link to that TikTok, in this particular case, it's a TikTok, in this week's show notes. Stay tuned at the end of the episode for another announcement from me, but now it's time for me to... I'm going to run around the corner and have a nice hot bath on a rainy day. It will feel good. And maybe sip some cool water. Lots of water. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. You can count on Adrienne with Adrienne Hill.
Hello everyone, this is Adrienne Hill from Skookum Studios in Calgary, Canada, and today I am talking to fellow Canadian Johnathan Jarry from the Office of Science and Society. Welcome, Johnathan.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me back.
Is this your third time on the podcast, I think? Maybe fourth?
That's true, because you did interview me when we were at the conference that I was speaking at in Calgary.
That's right, We Can Reason, which is coming up again this year.
Indeed.
Today, you released a rather stunning video on YouTube, along with the published article about Joseph Mercola. Can you tell us about that?
So Dr. Joseph Mercola, or Joe Mercola, is one of the OG alternative health gurus. He is an osteopathic physician, which in the United States is essentially indistinguishable from a medical doctor. So I'm not taking points off of him for that. He was a doctor, but he kind of fell in love with what he calls natural medicine. And he saw the promises of the internet very early on. He had a website in 1997, I believe, Mercola.com. And he basically became what I call the upside down doctor. Everything that medicine says is true. He says the exact opposite. He became a conspiracy theorist. He became an anti-vaxxer, a supplement salesman. His website cranks out new articles every day. He sells every dietary supplement you can think of. He has funded the anti-vaccine movement with millions of dollars. So incredibly influential. And he is friends with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., another anti-vaxxer who's now the Secretary for the Health and Human Services Department in the United States. So that story was already known. But what came out about a year ago in a trade publication for people who are interested in supplements is that Mercola was now consulting with a medium who is channeling an entity called Balan. And there have been a series of articles about this by journalist Rick Polito. And there were these sessions between Mercola and the channeler are recorded. And Polito had access to these videos. They had not been released. I was contacted by a whistleblower inside of Mercola's company who wanted these videos to come out. And so I've been working on this since December, watching hours and hours and hours of these Zoom sessions, over 50 hours in total that I watched, and putting all this together in a video and an article to reveal what's been happening behind closed doors between Mercola and this guy pretending to be channeling an entity.
And not only that, but you also discovered who the channeler was, like what his real name is, correct? And you had to kind of do some deep dive for that.
So that was an interesting aspect to the story. Chandler himself, he goes by the name of Kai Clay. That's not his real name. And I remembered in Rick Polito's coverage that he had unearthed his real name, Christopher Johnson. And I forgot that actually Rick Polito had figured out which Christopher Johnson he was. So I started from scratch with that name and I tried to figure out who he was. And it turns out that he is Christopher W. Johnson, the former CEO of a company called the Whitehorn Group, which was a branding agency in New York City. This is somebody who, based on his LinkedIn profile, has worked with major companies. The Infiniti automobile brand, he claims to be behind that. He has worked with Pepsi and Sesame Street and CNN for branding. And he claims to have been part of the U.S. Afghan Women's Council, led by Hillary Clinton and Laura Bush. Now, is any of this true? I don't know.
It seems like a strange leap from that kind of success to becoming a medium.
Well, so the thing is, I haven't been able to figure out why he pivoted in this way, why he went from having an apparently successful branding career in New York City to becoming a channeler in Florida and working with Mercola. But there is a precedent that I keep going back to, which is when I cover the Access Consciousness movement, which is this weird, very weird new agey thing where people are claimed to have access bars on their heads.
Yes.
When you do a massage of these bars, you can bring in more money or all kinds of things. The guy who created Access Consciousness was a realtor in the 80s and 90s.
That's correct, yeah.
And he went bankrupt. But he was going to these shindigs in Santa Barbara in the late 80s, early 90s, where it was very fashionable to have a channeler there. And he saw a guy who was claiming to be channeling some kind of entity, but he had a New Jersey accent, which, the future founder of Access Consciousness thought was weird and didn't sound very credible. So he thought, well, if this guy can do this, why can't I? And a few days later, wouldn't you know it, he started channeling the ghost of Rasputin.
Right.
And Rasputin dictated to him the basic principles of Access Consciousness. So I was reminded of this guy who, again, had this very legitimate, normal career and suddenly pivoted to channeling. And I wonder if something similar might have happened with this Christopher Johnson. I don't know. And I hope that journalists will further that story there.
That's interesting. Do you remember, I was the one that actually sent you the stuff about Access Consciousness.
That's true. That's true. I started looking at this going, what is this thing? And the more you keep digging, the weirder it gets.
Yeah, it was a crazy story. We actually covered it on the Skeptic Zone here, and I wrote the Wikipedia page because of your work.
There you go. And now because of you, I'm able to draw this parallel between Christopher Johnson and the founder of Access Consciousness. And so
that's amazing.
Yeah, from an anthropological perspective or from a psychological perspective, like why would somebody do this? What is happening there? I found an interview that Chris Johnson did in 2013 with PBS because he was a single gay dad who got a daughter through in vitro fertilization and surrogacy. And he goes, I'm making changes to my work to be more present in my child's life.
Yeah.
And there he is 10 years later being a channeler and whispering in Mercola's ear.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know if Mercola knows who he really is.
Indeed.
Or if really does think he's Kai Clay. What did you find out about Joseph Mercola that really concerns you? You had quite a few concerns in the video.
There's a very long list. I mean, first of all, for anybody who is getting health advice from Mercola, if you didn't realize beforehand that none of this stuff is particularly scientifically grounded, I have him on tape showing that he is getting now his medical information from the spirit, from Balan. He is asking medical and scientific questions out of a guy who closes his eyes and claims to be channeling an entity. And when he's not getting it from Balan, he is getting it from Chat GPT. That's right, the large language model, artificial intelligence, Chat GPT. He is using Chat GPT, and he says in one of the videos, Chat GPT says so, and Chat GPT wouldn't lie. So apparently he doesn't realize that AI can hallucinate.
That's right, yeah.
So that is concerning. He's also blowing carbon dioxide gas up his rectum, 1.5 liter at a time, multiple times a day, because he thinks that this will feed his microbiome and his gut. And also it apparently protects him from 5G radiation and from speeding tickets, apparently, as well, because he was about to get a speeding ticket, but the cop decided not to give him one. So now he thinks he's protected. There's this aura of protection around him.
Like a force field.
Like a force field, yeah. So there's all this stuff. And then there's a really dangerous stuff where, there's a call to violence against veterinarians. He hates veterinarians.
Which is just bizarre.
Which is very bizarre. I think it has something to do with the diet that veterinarians will recommend to dog owners. And he disagrees with that. And so he wants millions of people to march with weapons on these creatures, meaning veterinarians. He has a handgun, which he shows in one of the clips. And he talks about how cops will often miss their target from a few feet away, but not him. He won't miss because there's no fear in his brain.
Yeah.
There's talks about escaping to Mexico. He has bought some land over there. They want to build schools over there. He wants to convert all his assets into gold bars. He wants to buy a Mexican passport for $30,000. So, I'm looking at this stuff thinking this is very doomsday cult-ish.
Very much so.
And I do worry about this transition from him being simply a health misinformer to becoming a conspiritualist guru. There's a real danger there, especially when you're at the mercy of a channeler, because every decision that Mercola has to make in his life now goes through this channeler.
Yeah, and then you add in the Trump administration and Mercola's connection with people that Trump has actually put in power. And that is a concern too, correct?
That is a big concern because he held a fundraiser for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. when Kennedy was running as a presidential nominee. So he is friends with him. He knows him. They run in similar circles. I have heard rumors that Mercola was offered a position at HHS so that he thought he wasn't running for a position. He was meeting with RFK Jr. very recently, I am told. And so all this is happening in the background. And there's a very real possibility that Mercola could be nominated for a position within the Health and Human Services Department in the U.S. And if that were to happen, and if he were to be confirmed, you can imagine what could happen if somebody like this, who already has these beliefs that run completely against, mainstream medicine and science, who now has to run every decision through a guy who pretends to be channeling an entity. So imagine him as the head of the CDC, dealing with infectious diseases and asking this branding executive what he should do about an outbreak of measles or what have you.
Yeah.
So there are these two avenues of, he goes to Mexico and creates a compound for his cult, or he starts running the CDC. Neither of these scenarios is a good one. I'm very, very, very worried about what might happen in the near future with Mercola.
And if you'd asked me a year ago that if this would be a concern, I would never have dreamt that it could be. But I think the reality is now we have to worry about it. Another fascinating thing you discovered, or the channeler is telling him he's going to win Nobel Prizes.
Yeah, so one of the recurring trends in these Mercola tapes is that the channeler is really feeding Mercola's grandiosity and the fame that he wants to have. And so the channeler, under the guise of Balan, will say, hey, you will win more Nobel Prizes than anybody has ever won. You will have multiple biographies written about you, including by Walter Isaacson. This device that you're working on is going to be such a revolution. It will be in a museum next to the first Model T and the first Apple computer. There's a civil action that's been filed against Mercola and Johnson by Mercola's former CEO, whom he fired, Steve Rye, in which Steve Rye says, hey, Mercola thinks he's the new Jesus. literally. Because Mercola now thinks that the Catholic Church is the evil cabal, and Mercola will be the new Jesus, and he's recruiting disciples. And I have him on tape talking about a new female employee that he has just hired, saying she's the first disciple. And look, we're not sexist. First disciple is a female. So, yeah, that's very troubling.
Yeah, extremely troubling. And I don't know. I'm speechless, to be honest. When I think you said the biggest reaction to your video is people's jaws on the ground, and they're just shocked.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working on this for a few months, and so I've become accustomed to it. It's sort of like your tolerance for weirdness goes up as you're going through this footage, most of which is quite banal and boring, to be honest. But then you have these nuggets of, hold on, let me rewind this because I can't believe what I just heard. And when it's presented, as I did in this 1 hour video, all in one go, and somebody sees this and they have no idea what's coming. I mean, it starts with the veterinarians, Mercola wanting to have them killed, and that's just the baseline. And it keeps
Yes.
getting weirder and weirder and weirder. It is a shocker. It's astonishing. And yet it's true.
Yeah, it's
all
crazy.
True.
Well, I certainly hope that it gains some ground and people hear about this, because I always like to think of skepticism as consumer protectionism.
Yes.
And being protected against somebody like Joseph Mercola, I think, is very important. And the sheer quantity of stuff that he produces and the millions of followers he has a huge influence. So it's important to get this information out. Because you were saying in the video, I think he writes a book every 2 weeks or something like that?
So this didn't used to be the case, but now that he is working with McLeod, he is writing one book a week.
Oh my.
They're not being published every week, but the way that this is working now is that he assigns a ghostwriter to a topic. The topic could be parenting, it could be veterinary care, it could be what to eat, what not to eat. And then he creates a little outline for the ghostwriter. The ghostwriter has a virtual session with McLeod, asks McLeod all these questions. That gets recorded by AI, transcribed, and Mercola does a bit of editing. Boom, there's your book. And now it's ready to be sold.
That is terrifying. Parenting.
That is terrifying. I mean, already we're seeing AI-generated books being sold on Amazon. Yeah. This is a version of that in a sense. It's complete nonsense. Yeah. This is in the pipeline now. And so that is terrifying. But then you were mentioning how important this is, and skeptics, all that kind of stuff. There's the final lesson that I think for us skeptics is that we're very quick to point to people like Mercola and call them scam artists and con artists, grifters. I watched over 50 hours of these tapes. I saw almost no indication that Mercola is a con artist. He is a true believer. He really believes this stuff. He is literally blowing CO2 up his bum because he believes in it.
Exactly.
And shouldn't be so quick to dismiss the fact that a lot of these top-level influencers, they're doing this not just to get rich. Of course, that is a motivation.
Of course.
At the back of their heads, I'm sure. But mainly because they really believe that the mainstream is lying to you and they have the answer.
Yeah, exactly. They're true believers and they want to spread the word.
Yep. It's very easy to be deluded about something, to think that, to be overconfident in your ability to parse through the scientific literature, and to be a contrarian, to just think, to just flat out reject the mainstream and think, the truth must be outside of the mainstream.
Right. And they're charismatic, and Mercola is well educated.
Very much so.
He's got the qualifications, so people will follow him, look at him.
He is avuncular. He seems to mean well. And again, he really believes what he's saying. And so that is very appealing to a lot of people.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, thanks so much, Johnathan. This was a fascinating talk. I wish we could talk longer. I think we could talk about this for several hours.
Yes, well, people can go watch the full video. Even if you've heard our conversation just now, you don't know what you're in for.
No, exactly. And we'll put the link to the video as well as to your article, which is on the website, the McGill website. We'll make sure we put that in the show notes.
Perfect.
But thank you so much, Johnathan, again, and hope we see you again on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill from Skookum Studios in Calgary, Canada.
Allora ciao, io mi chiamo Professore Dave, io ti voglio insegnare tutte le cose sulla scienza. Parliamo di fisica, di chimica, biologia, astronomia, matematica e tante altre cose. Guardami su YouTube, arrivederci. Hey everyone, this is Professor Dave. I want to teach you about all kinds of things regarding science. I want to tell you about physics. I want to tell you about chemistry, biology, astronomy, math, and many, many more things. Come check me out on YouTube. The channel is called Professor Dave Explains. Take it easy. He knows a lot about the science stuff. Professor Dave explains.
During some of my recent research into various matters skeptical through the digital archives, which are becoming quite extensive these days, I came across a piece which I have in front of me. Is it an opinion piece? I guess it is. It's from a magazine called Australasian Science, and this piece dates back from way back, from October 2002. So 23 years ago. And this is a piece by, let me see here at the bottom of the page, who's this by? Oh, Richard Saunders. And it says here, Richard Saunders is the president of Australian Skeptics Inc., which I was at the time. Now, I do remember writing this piece, but I haven't thought about it for, well, decades. It's under the banner, or the section of the magazine called The Naked Skeptic. I assure you I'm wearing clothes reading this nevertheless. Abusing science made easy. We all know that the science of astrology and the science of water divining are thousands of years old, much like the science of feng shui and the science of palm reading. Newcomers to medical science include the science of homeopathy, the science of chiropractic, and the science of iridology. At the same time, we must also bear in mind that Western science is closed-minded to all the valid alternatives, especially when it comes to alternative medicine. After all, basing your thoughts and opinions upon evidence is so out of date when testimonials are just as valid, and maybe even better. Sounds ridiculous? Every day science is being distorted and abused to justify all manner of pseudoscience and quackery. The public can, at times, be hoodwinked when confronted by scientific-sounding words and arguments. Even the humblest of scientific words can be hijacked to give credibility to the credulous. It's time we all took this attack on one of the most important foundations of our society a little more seriously. A case in point involves the science of homeopathy. To many people, this blatant quackery is as valid as any other form of medicine. Australian skeptics recently uncovered, brought to the attention of the authorities, and had banned homeopathic vaccines being sold for meningococcal meningitis and hepatitis B. These vaccines had delusions, as we like to say in the skeptics, of 200C. Not up on homeopathy's law of infinitesimals, 200C equates to 10 to the power of 400. These bottles of water-alcohol mix were being sold as real vaccines with the strength of the active ingredient being, please laugh very loudly if you wish, 1 part in 10 to the 400. A teaspoon of the active ingredient mixed into the Pacific Ocean would not even come close to a dilution of 200C. Even though a homeopathic product has no measurable active ingredients and produces no measurable response, it is still called medicine and is prescribed by people who call themselves health care professionals or even practitioners. The words of medical science are plundered with such ease. We hope that not too many worried parents were fooled into giving their children these fake vaccines before the scam was uncovered. But who could blame them for thinking it was the real McCoy? It was a sad case of a wolf dressed in science clothing. Speaking of clothing, let's put in a special mention for the humble white lab coat. Thanks to this bit of cloth, it is no longer necessary to spend years of your life and thousands of dollars at some university in order to get a medical degree. Why on earth would you, when a lab coat costs so little? You can also spend a little extra and buy a second-hand stethoscope and become a specialist. Not so, you think? In shopping centres all over the country, people in white lab coats offer to treat your medical complaints with traditional remedies and mystic wisdom. To the average punter, the white lab coat is a sign of medical credibility. Credibility that, in this case, is stolen from real medical science. But let's not forget closed-minded Western science. The same people who take such delight in calling their particular belief system a science will just as quickly pour scorn on real science when it suits them. This usually happens when real science fails to support or confirm their belief system. Some even go so far as to label Western science as pure evil, while their particular beliefs are, of course, in line with the harmony of the universe. Words like balance and energies are often thrown in. Abusing science is made easy by all of us who know and understand science and the scientific method, sitting back and not speaking up. Quacks, charlatans, and the self-deluded take great delight in using and abusing the language, tools, and credibility of science to further their own beliefs and agendas. Often it's just the wallet that is in danger. But in the case of homeopathic vaccines, lives are put at risk. Next time you hear someone use the words alternative medicine, you might be motivated to point out that the more accurate term is pseudomedicine. But if we all stay very quiet, we can let, quote, armies of darkness, end quote, be they con sharks or just the well-meaning but ill-informed, get on with their job, and the public need be none the wiser. As Shakespeare himself put it, the fault, dear Brutus, lies not in the stars, but in ourselves. And again, that was Abusing Science Made Easy, published in the Australasian Science magazine way back in October 2002, an opinion piece by one Richard Saunders.
This is Susan Gerbic from Psychics Explained. That's the YouTube channel where we discuss and analyze in great depth all those people who say that they can speak to the dead, all those readings, how they look like they're actually communicating with people. Why do people fall for this? There's a reason. It's much more complicated than you would think. Come to my channel, watch our videos. We would love to have you become part of our conversation. Just visit us on YouTube at Psychics Explained or Psychic Sex Plained on YouTube.
Time once again to go back to those archives no matter where they are, in what we call the Trove segment, normally because we go to Trove at trove.nla.gov.au. In fact, we will be going there today, but we certainly will be casting a wide net as we look into the subject of graphology. Yes, graphology. Make sure you write it down. Graphology is the pseudoscience of gleaning information about the personality of somebody from their handwriting. And needless to say, because it's a subject of this segment, you can bet your bottom dollar, it is indeed a pseudoscience. It doesn't work, but many people swear by it, which is a hallmark of a pseudoscience, I guess. Now, I find graphology interesting because it is just like reading the stars, reading somebody's palm, face reading, psychometry, tarot. It goes on and on. It's just a prop. It's just a method. It's just a way to end up doing the same old, mostly cold reading. Let's have a look over at the Skeptic's Dictionary. Graphology, graphoanalysis. Graphology is the study of handwriting, especially when employed as a means of analysing character and personality traits. Real handwriting experts are known as forensic document examiners, not as graphologists. Forensic, or question, document examiners consider loops, dotted I's and crossed T's, letter spacing, slants, heights, ending strokes, etc. They examined handwriting to detect authenticity or forgery. Now, these are the sort of people who can look at the checks, for example, to see if the signature's been forged. Graphologists, or graphoanalysts, examine loops, dotted I's and crossed T's, letter spacing, slants, heights, ending strokes, up slant pressure, down slant pressure, etc., but they believe that such handwriting minutiae are physical manifestations of unconscious mental functions. Graphologists believe such details can reveal as much about a person as astrology, palm reading, psychometry, rumpology, or the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator. Oh, there we go. It's exactly what I was saying before. I probably read this segment on graphology at some stage during the past, but even if I hadn't, it's still obvious that graphology is simply a prop. It's simply a method to get to the same ends as cold reading. And it goes on, however, there is no evidence that the unconscious mind is a reservoir of truth about a person, much less that graphology provides a gateway into that reservoir. And the article goes on. Later on down the page it says, add to cold reading the Barnum effect, confirmation bias, communal reinforcement, the Forer effect, and subjective validation, and you get a fairly complete explanation for graphology's popularity. Graphology is another pipe dream of those who want a quick and dirty decision-making process to tell them who to marry, who did the crime, who they should hire, what career they should seek, and where the hunting is good, where the water, oil, or buried treasure is, etc. And you can imagine a typical graphology session. Somebody writes something down, or somebody examines some handwriting, and they say, oh, look, the E here. Look how you've done the E, or look at the E in this example, this cursive E. It's quite a large loop. Now, this can normally tend to be from somebody who is a little bit maybe open to new ideas. You get the idea. Oh, it's a 3 of Wands. Now, this can tend to lead to me thinking that you're open to new ideas. Aries in Taurus. I think you tend to be open to new ideas. Well, what's this lifeline? It's crossing your heart line. This means you tend to be open to new ideas. However, why don't we now dive into some various archives, and unusually we're going to start with a TV show. This show dates back from 1991, I think it was. It was in the UK, and it was called James Randi, Psychic Investigator. And every time I would talk about this to James Randi himself, he always made sure that I knew, or he would always mention that there was a colon after the word James Randi. It wasn't James Randi, Psychic Investigator. It was James Randi, Psychic Investigator, meaning he was investigating psychic phenomena, not that he was a psychic investigator. It was one of the times Randi and I would have a laugh. Now this, as I said, this was from 1991, and it was produced by Granada TV at the time. Now I must take credit, or the blame, hopefully the credit. Many years ago, probably in the order of 20 years ago, I went to the late Barry Williams. I went to his house. He was the editor of The Skeptic and the former president of the Australian Skeptics, and he had quite a collection of videoed TV videos he'd made over the years on VHS, and I digitized many of those, and what I found in his collection was James Randi, Psychic Investigator, in a sort of semi-good condition, so I digitized those. I seem to remember uploading them to Google TV, Google Video, Google something or other. And subsequently, whenever I go to research that show in particular and I discover the video of it, it seems to me, although I might be wrong, it seems to me that people have copied hundreds of times and posted all over the place examples of my original digitizing. I might be wrong, but it looks to me to be the same one I did because of the nature of the interference patterns and so on. Which, I mean, I take a little bit of comfort from that, because the show that Randi did all those years ago, way back in 1991, through very little effort from me, from digitizing, has meant that that has become a reference point going far into the future, which is a nice thing. But I digress. Here is a clip from that show, and the subject of the clip, naturally enough, is graphology. Now, please pay particular attention to the personality traits as described by the graphologists of the 5 women in question. And I think you'll see, as I did, that it really is just another example of Barnum statements and more or less attempts of cold reading.
It seems that you can do a lot of reading about writing. Any bookstore or library today offers a great selection of books on personality analysis through handwriting. Though psychometry may not be used in a serious commercial sense, evaluating personality and personal potential through handwriting is used. The use of graphology in business to assess people for purposes of employment is on the increase. In 1979, an estimated 85% of European firms used graphology for recruitment purposes, so that if you happen to apply to one of those firms, you might have been either selected or rejected by this process. Now, please welcome an expert graphologist, Mr. Duncan McIntosh. Duncan, thank you for coming tonight. In a few moments, you're going to demonstrate your expertise with the assistance of 5 volunteers. Now, graphologists often suggest that someone is in the wrong job based on an analysis of their handwriting.
40% of us are in the wrong job.
Now, normally you would be told by the company you're working for that they're looking for a particular person, a salesman, for example, and they'd ask you for an analysis of a handwriting sample. Is that right?
Right.
Well, tonight you've agreed to do this test with us. Earlier in the day, we gave you 5 examples of handwriting, each one from a different career, a career that you have designated as being suitable for this experiment. Well, we have a saleswoman, computer training officer, an artist, a secretary, and a farmer, and these 5 ladies are with us in the studio tonight. We tried to avoid leaving any clues in the handwriting samples as to each person's career. Nevertheless, I understand that on the basis of graphological analysis, you've tried to allocate each sample to its author.
Right.
Now, the expected result by chance would be to get 1 out of the 5 correct, by chance alone, and there's a less than 1% chance of your getting all 5 correct. Let's start with sample A.
She is a person who is very adaptable. She can adapt herself anywhere, but at the same time, she's a little introverted. So I had a tussle whether it was the computer or the saleswoman, and I went for the saleswoman.
Thank you very much. Will Lady A please go to the sales ladies section? That would be the brush salesman right here, I believe. Now, what about number B here?
Yeah, that's a bit a difficult one, because you see, here is somebody who feels that they have not used all their talents. The job she should be doing, whatever she's doing, and I put her as computers.
So you placed Lady B in the computer profession?
I did.
I'm going to ask Lady B to step over behind the computer. All right, and what about C?
She's one who likes plenty of space, doesn't like to be cooped up. She is up in the clouds a bit. She does a lot of thinking, and I'm going to say something particularly definite here, and you can tell me whether it's right or whether it's wrong. Do you have a scar in your abdomen?
Wrong.
No, you don't.
No scar on the abdomen. What profession did you allocate to them?
Well, I allocated her between the land and, in fact, the sales.
You chose
I chose the land, that's right.
All right, this lady will step around to where we find the tractor down in the end there, please. And what about sample D?
Well, in sample D, I decided that this was the artist because of the intuition, considerable intuition here, and one who, in fact, is very versatile in all aspects. There is a lightness and delicacy to the handwriting.
So this lady is the artist in your estimation. Very well. Would you step over behind the palette and the brushes, please? And finally, I think I can guess which one this is.
Yes, it was here between the secretary and the computer, and I came for the secretary because home life is vital, and she's logical as well, and she can good with people.
See, well, we have not much choice for you, young lady. Would you step over behind the typewriter, please, because you apparently are supposed to be the secretary. Well, I'm going to ask each one of these ladies in turn. First of all, number one, are you indeed a salesman? Vote with yes or no. You are not the salesperson. And number two, are you a computer expert? You are not. Number three, are you the artist? Ah, you are. And number four, are you that secretary we're looking for? Apparently not. And number five, are you a farmer? I see. Well, would you please move to the correct positions that you belong in, the four ladies that were not correct? Would you move to the correct positions? Now we know who is really in that profession. We expected that according to chance, Duncan, you would get one correct, and you got exactly one correct. Thank you very much, Duncan. We're very grateful for you coming along here this evening. Now, as we mentioned earlier, graphology is widely used on the continent, and its use is increasing here in Britain. But there seems to be quite a margin of error. How would you feel if your career depended on the analysis of your handwriting?
Now, once again, those episodes are available. All you have to do is Google James Randi Psychic Investigator, and you should be able to find that series, which I recommend you watch the whole series. It's fascinating, and it has lessons for us today. Another rich source of everything these days seems to be TikTok, and I'll play you a short example of a graphologist giving a lecture, and part of this lecture has ended up on TikTok.
Another one is gullible. Gullibility is an interesting one. These are people who are taken advantage of a lot. Small letter E, and in Edward, this will tell you how open people are to other people's ideas. If the E is essentially like that, that's normal. They'll let other people speak, they'll give them a listen, they'll consider what the person's saying. If it's tiny like this, so it's closed up, and that's an E, this is someone who tunes out other people. So, you know, they're talking, and you're going internal and just thinking about what you're going to say back to them and not really considering what they're saying. That's somebody who tunes you out. Watch out for that with a client. You're helping them with their problems, and they're off somewhere else in their head. They're not listening. You have to bring them back. Let's suppose the loop gets huge. If it becomes round like that, that's gullibility. That is so open to other people's ideas that they'll believe anything.
And finally, from our examples from videos and whatnot, here's another short excerpt from TikTok. And I think this one demonstrates clearly the dangers of such a pseudoscience as graphology in labeling people or trying to define people's personality simply from their handwriting / birth date / star sign / lines on their palm / tarot card reading, etc.
Hi, I'm Tina. Let me show you why handwriting never lies.
Let's take a look at one of the most dangerous traits seen in handwriting, the felon's claw. The stroke of this trait is much like an upside-down cup or a curve that is backwards and turns down. The higher the claw comes, the more serious it is and the more the writer is conscious of their guilt and possible criminal nature. Someone, or maybe even many someones in their past, have made this writer feel extremely unworthy and skeptical of others' true intentions. The felon's claw shows up in the handwriting of people who do things to self-sabotage, and they can feel compelled to put themselves in self-destructive situations and do things that continually mess up their lives. In fact, over 80% of convicted felons have the felon's claw stroke in their handwriting.
And as that last statement goes, my reply is, oh, really? Really? That's a bold statement? Really? But now let's head to the digital archives. And our first one comes from the Sydney Morning Herald, dated the 8th of July 1989. And this will be read to us by Kat McLeod.
Hunches help paint a picture. Helen Marie Dickinson is a handwriting analyst. She believes handwriting is like a photograph of someone's personality and, if translated into useful information by a graphologist, can clarify issues in the person's life. Handwriting analysis is not yet well known in Australia, says Helen, who has studied graphology for 14 years. It has been used in Europe for decades by psychologists and is popular in the U.S. as an adjunct to marriage and career counseling. Helen decided to give business-like consultations after dazzling her friends with accurate insights into their needs and desires simply by looking at their handwriting, which she generally studies with the word sheet held upside down. Although Helen says graphology is a science, she admits to relying on, quote, hunches, end quote, to give, quote, a whole living picture of the person being analyzed, end quote. If you want to put yourself in such hands, Helen is available for consultations on Thursdays. Bookings can be made at Margaret Allen's and Victor Voigt's Orb Bookshop, 33 Bronte Road, Bondi Junction, telephone 389-3058. And just below this article, there is a charming cartoon with a couple sitting across the table from each other. The man says, "I'm handsome, talented, rich, amusing." And the woman says, "Could you put that in writing?"
Our next entry here comes from the Age newspaper, dated the 7th of October, 1969. And this comes to us from Adrienne Hill.
Normally, it can take 2 to 3 years to get to know a person. With graphology, it takes only a few minutes, according to graphologist Madame Livia Lilly.
Handwriting can show you people's abilities, their characteristics, their honesty, even their sex life and whether it's fulfilled,
she said in Melbourne yesterday. But does she always tell her clients the truth about themselves as she sees it from their handwriting?
If I'm able to tell the truth, I tell it,
she said.
But some people can't face the truth. And that makes me very angry.
Madame Lilly is here from Sydney to expound her truths for the benefit of customers at Myers. Yesterday, her first day there, was exhausting, she said. But she's used to a big workload. After all, during the past 2 years, she's done graphology in a big way on the handwriting of 35,000 people. And for the past 6 months, she has written a weekly column on graphology for a Sydney newspaper. Madame Lilly began learning graphology 20 years ago when she took private lessons from a professor of graphology in Budapest.
Graphology is taught in universities in Australia, Switzerland, Germany, France, and America. It is not fortune-telling,
she said. There's only one hitch. Graphology is not a very lucrative career here.
In America, a handwriting expert can get from $75 to $100 for one analysis. Here, you get about $12,
she said. If you want to know all about yourself and can face the truth, Madame Lilly will oblige between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. daily for the rest of the week.
And finally, once again with Kat McLeod, we have an entry here dated the 29th of April 2005, and this comes to us from the Australian Jewish News.
Handwriting Secrets Unlocked by Lauren Blumenthal. If you have ever wondered what your handwriting says about you, New York-based Kabbalistic graphologist Johnathan Rosenthal may have the answers. Rosenthal has combined graphology with various Jewish teachings in order to show you how handwriting is connected to the soul. Most people don't know when they write they're actually seeing their soul come out on the piece of paper, Rosenthal says. Rosenthal has practiced graphology for 14 years after studying at the Manhattan School of Graphology. After learning with renowned geologist Felix Klein, Rosenthal incorporated Kabbalah into his practice through the use of Jewish texts. And I'd like to break in here to say, I'm not sure if geologist is an error, and they meant graphologists, or if studying rocks and handwriting go hand in hand. Anyway, the flow from the brain to the hand is uninterrupted, combining two elements, content and energy. He adds, you can tell a person's basic personality and how they're going to react in most given situations. If they're social, talkative, reserved, or if there's a major problem they are overcompensating for, he explains. Rosenthal will conduct a handwriting analysis seminar on Wednesday, May 18, at Soda Bar. RSVP, area code 02-9267-2477, or Mandel at greatsynagogue.org.au. Although that was 20 years ago, so I think you're a little late.
So there we are, a look into graphology. And you might say that this is a case of two rights make a wrong, or something like that. And I was surprised to find there are many more examples of graphology mentioned throughout Australian published history. We might do a part 2 of this subject at another time. But you too can find all sorts of things to write about, then analyse your handwriting when you go to Trove at trove.nla.gov.au. Type in your search, because you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. If you like the episode, please write to me on a postcard and I can analyse your handwriting. Coming up on next week's show, we're going to be looking at, I think what's lined up is looking at Yeti, the abominable snowman, in the Trove segment. We're going to have a sneak peek of an interview that Rob Palmer has done with one of the flat earthers who went to the South Pole, or at least in the vicinity. And I'm going to be looking at the recent invasion of UFOs. Well, it was last weekend. Did you miss it? I looked out the window and I couldn't see any, but I'll be talking about that because there were a lot of people convinced that last weekend was the time where the UFOs, especially the motherships, would become apparent. Motherships. That always makes me nostalgic for the 1970s because I remember the movie Close Encounter of the Third Kind made that term popular. Thank you to those people who I find very popular who contribute to the show via Patreon or PayPal, especially these days more so Patreon. You can do that at skepticzone.tv if you enjoy the show. I encourage you to contribute, even if it's only $5 or $10 a month. It really, collectively, it really helps keep the Skeptic Zone going. And just before I go, the whole Series 1 of Psychic Penny's adventures with the Galactic Federation is now on YouTube. Again, I'll link to that in this week's show notes. You can click on the link, sit back, and listen to the whole incredible adventure. But for this week, as I wait for the mothership UFO to carry me off to the pyramids so I can inspect these fantastic new underground generators under the pyramids, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
Hey, Kat.
Hi, Adrienne. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I think it's time. Let me see. I predict it's time for the psychic dice roll. I'm going to be Psychic Penny.
Ooh. Ooh. Well, I'd love to be Agent Zorak, but I don't have my cool filter.
Ooh, maybe Richard will put it on for us. What do you think?
Oh, we could ask.
Well, and before we get started, I just want to make a little bit of an announcement because you know I'm going to be leaving the country, right?
Yes, you're leaving me.
I know. You're leaving me. So I'm going to be in Melbourne and Sydney. Most important thing is on Monday, March 31st is going to be a special event at the Skeptics Cafe in Melbourne.
Do they have cats there?
Cats?
Is it a cat cafe?
Oh, it should be. Can you come?
If I was there, it would be a cat cafe.
It would be. Can you come? I think you should. Anyways, it starts at 6 p.m.
What are you doing there?
What am I doing? I'm going to do a presentation about Tourette syndrome. It's one of my favorite topics. You know that, right? So I'm really excited about it.
Awesome. That's going to be fantastic.
And there's going to be lots of interaction. You're going to learn lots about the myths. It's called Tourette Syndrome, Sounds, Movements, and Myths. It's a similar presentation that I've done before, but it's going to have lots of new stuff. So please do come and hang out. I'd love to meet you guys if you're in the Melbourne area. And check out the Facebook page. Well, maybe Richard will put it in the show notes. And I'm looking forward to this event in Melbourne and seeing all the people, Michelle and Karen Bickersma, the Skeptical Fairy.
Will Lara be there?
No, Lara's in Sydney. I'm hoping to get together with Lara and many others. I was hoping to get together with Sue Arachi, but she's going to be in Portugal. How dare she?
How dare she?
And so many others. There's some GSOW editors that I'm hoping to get together with. So please feel free to reach out if I haven't reached out because my brain is kind of dead right now trying to get ready for this holiday. So
yeah, you're busy packing and planning and being excited.
Don't hesitate to reach out. I have a dead brain.
And maybe bring me back a postcard.
I'll try and bring you back a postcard. Maybe a koala bear.
Don't bother mailing it. Just bring it back.
Wait for way too long.
I'm seeing you in May, so
Exactly. We'll see you then.
Bring it back.
Speaking of May, that's the Week in Reason. So if you're in Canada or if you want to travel from Australia to Canada
or anywhere.
Yeah, I'm emceeing the Week in Reason conference and it's a great lineup. So check that out too.
Yeah, Seth Andrews is going to be there.
Yeah. And Eugenie Scott is going to be there.
Yeah.
Rodney Schmaltz. Susan Gerbic. And speaking of Susan Gerbic, what dice are we going to do? And are we going to use the Susan Gerbic number? Do you want to go first?
I want to use the isosahedron. I feel saucy.
So 20 sides.
I know that's not the proper name, but that's what I call it.
It's a great name. And I think that's what we should call it from now on.
So I'm going to pick 19 because that's what I pick.
I'm going to pick 13 because I've been saying 11's my favorite number, but really my most favorite number is 13.
All right. Well, here we go. It's a 12. Oh, so close, brah. So close.
Yeah. Okay. So my turn. I'm going to roll the Celestia Ward die.
Oh, the itty bitty mini one. I love that one.
The itty bitty mini one. So it's 6-sided and you probably won't even hear me roll it, but here we go. Oh, you got to guess first. You'd think I'd know that by now.
I can roll a 6-sided one just for the sound effects if you want.
There we go. Let's do that.
I want a 3 for that.
You want a 3? I'm going to do the Susan Gerbic number, which is 5.
Okay.
It's a 5. Woohoo! I'm psychic. So is Susan.
And I could hear you. Like when you could hear it.
Yeah, it was not too bad.
You didn't need my sound effect.
Barely, huh? Let me do it again. Not bad. So 4 this time, but that didn't count.
It was a 4 when I rolled it for the sound effects.
Oh, there you go.
So anyone who guessed a 4, you get a point.
All right. So what die are you going to choose this time?
I'm going to choose an 8-sided die.
8-sided.
An octahedron.
Very good.
And I'm going to guess a 7.
7. 5 is hot, so I'm going to go with 5.
All right. 3.
Oh, you guessed that last time. You're just one roll off. For the last round, the 4th round, just for the bonus round, because this is the extra psychic round.
Yes, focus.
What die will Psychic Penny choose? Kat, I have it in my hand.
Dodecahedron.
Isosahedron.
Oh.
20-sided.
I was close. There was lots of sides.
There were, yes.
The Galactic Federation isn't feeling it today. What can I say?
I know. So, Psychic Penny is going to be dramatic. What number would you like to roll?
I would still like a number 19.
19. And I will choose the very important galactic number 13. Why it's important, I have no idea.
Because Emperor Snazzleflurp says so.
There you go. It is a 20.
Ooh.
So, the winning rolls today are 12, 5, the Susan Gerbic number, 3, and 20. How did you guys do?
You weren't so psychic, Penny.
No, I was more psychic than you. I did get one right.
Agent Zorak never claimed to be psychic. Come on, Penny. Agent Zorak just knows how to play with machines in the slightly rusty bucket.
Oh, that was fun.